Oops, what did I just do? Oh, okay, I got you. All right. Hello, I'm George Middleton, your host this evening for this podcast episode of Black Space Live. For the topic of our discussion today, we're going to examine the following question, part two of Are We a Community? However, I would like to take time briefly to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. In other words, don't be selfish with this content. Share the love. I'll be framing this discussion tonight as we did in part one on an icon in our community, an individual who has dedicated decades of his time and business laying out the modern foundations to establish economic empowerment and quality of life for us. His name is Dr. Claude Anderson, and we discussed his 5-floor platform towards building a strong community. And we'll get into that as we continue part two. But before we do that, before we get into the heat and meat of this discussion, I want to introduce the contenders in the ring today. We have an exciting panel of highly powerful minds, voices, and personalities that are going to shake up the platform. So before we get started, I'd like you guys to tell the audience what you want them to know that you think is relevant uh, for their for their knowledge today. We'll start with Rock.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. My name is Rock Soldier. I'm co-founder of two organizations, Ngia Nation and IA, the International Association of Yetu Africans. And I think I would start off this discussion the way that I start off many discussions is the solution or one of the solutions to the problems in our community is disorganization. I believe that um, the bulk of our problems come from an organized system, and the solution to our problems require organized. We have to be organized. We can't solve our problems as individuals.
Agreed. Welcome, Rock. Daniel.
Man, first and foremost, Daniel Williams, aka Mr. Cheat Code, aka the Worldwide Wolf. Just want to go ahead and co-sign everything that Rock just said, and understand there has to be an understanding. Just my little add on to what Rock said as his base. We have to understand that the challenges we face as a community are systemic, not individual. And so, even where there's evidence of systemic, of individual attainment, that does not discount the fact that there's still systemic oppression. And it's so amazing how it was developed because it was created as a system, but it doesn't require active maintenance in order to keep going. It just requires apathy to be maintained. So looking forward to the discussion, and definitely looking forward to looking at ways we can start talking about solutions as well.
Yeah.
Welcome, Daniel.
Pleasure.
So just a brief review of the, yeah, that's right. Just a brief review of Dr. Claude Anderson's community building model, 5-floor building. First floor, economic foundation. Nothing starts without creating an economic base. Second floor, with the economic power that you have from the first floor, you now can go to the second floor, which is politics, and influence your political representatives. Third floor, now with the muscle of economics, the influence, the political influence that it engenders, you take that up to the third floor, which is justice. And with justice, you can now, with political influence, have be able to insert your needs and your desires as to how the system of justice treats our community. From that third floor, you then go to the fourth floor, which is media. Media is where we now can create and control our own narratives that's relevant culturally to our group. It doesn't have to be relevant to anyone else. It doesn't matter. We're not against them, but we need to tell the news and the stories and the business that is going to best reflect us and best inform us and best inspire us. And then from there, you go to the last floor, which is education. With the power of the first floors, you can now either influence the current education system to teach your children what you know your children need, or better yet, you could create your own system of education to teach your children what they need to know. So from there, I'm going to open up the floor. We've got some current happenings that have occurred since our last talk, so we're going to weave those in as we see appropriate. But I want to open up the floor now to the panelists and ask you guys to, beginning with Daniel, to expound on what you just heard and what's come across your mind as we've been talking.
Wow. All right. Where do we start? There's been a lot of hand-wringing around the recent shift in the Supreme Court and how that focus specifically has created the rollback of the protections of Roe versus Wade. I need us to be reminded that two things that are important to this discussion. One, it is not about people of melanated skin and of African descent. We are just a casualty in this discussion. It does come back to the fact that currently, school age children, um, young people of melanated backgrounds, that's Hispanic, that's of African descent, currently make up a majority of school age children in this country. And what you're seeing here is a very, very concentrated and intentional effort to slow down that rate of that shift towards a country to where people of European descent are no longer are slow down the descent of people of European descent no longer being the majority demographically in this country. So whenever you see shifts like this happening, understand it through the lens of this comes back to trying to protect a demographic majority. And in this country, there have always been a demographic majority. This shift is something that scares a lot of them, so much so that you're starting to see young men of European descent act out and actually name it. There is they call it the Great Replacement Theory or something of the sort. It is the motivation behind a lot of what you're seeing as the lashing out. So that is something to keep in mind. When looking at it through that lens, it then becomes a question of what can we do as a community to understand why this shift is important, and what they're trying to protect. Because it's not really about protecting the numbers, but what the numbers signify. And I look forward to having a broader discussion around that as we go through this conversation. But I'll definitely leave some time. I see my brother Karanji just made it on, so I'll leave a little bit of time for Rock and then for Karanji to also go ahead and share his thoughts.
Brother Karanji, what's happening?
Yeah, before we go to Rock, welcome, Brother Karanji. You want to tell the viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself that you think they should know? Do we have him? You're still muted, brother. Nope, still muted.
Yeah, we can't hear you, brother.
All right. Well, while he's getting it together, Rock, you can go ahead. We'll keep the flow going while Karanji's putting it together.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well,
Can you hear
out.
me?
Yes, sir.
All right, good.
Oh,
Brothers, excuse the late arrival. I was doing some very important business. Um, I'm Kamaji, Kaduma, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. Very much into, for most importantly, love of our people and apologetically. Also into doing whatever I can to uplift our youth and to also begin to cultivate our culture and to also begin to cultivate African spirituality as well. And it's all about just do whatever I can to show love our people. I'm an educator by trade, I guess you could say. I'm a teacher for the last 20 years here in Detroit. I'm also a musician. I'm really big into fitness. I mean, I'm one of some people call me a Renaissance man. I don't know if I call myself a Renaissance man. I do a lot of stuff though. I do gardening. I'm one of those guys. I get bored easily, so I do a lot of stuff. I'm about to ask you if I can switch to this tablet because this computer camera is horrible. This tablet is way better. Let's see if I can see if it goes.
Well, welcome, brother Karanji,
Thank you very
aka
much.
the Renaissance man.
Right,
AKA I do it all.
right.
I can vouch for him with that. He is that, and that's not definitely not a negative. That's a positive. I was in his driveway one day, and he came to me with a handful of black eyed peas, and he gave me. He's like, "Go ahead, man. You can eat them. They're right off." And I was like, "For real?" He's like, "Yeah." So he makes his own honey. Um, I know this is not a PSA about Karanji, but I just want to, just vouch for the brother. He's a definitely a good brother and a Renaissance man. Yeah.
Awesome.
So you were looking for my feedback on the Supreme Court matters. Um, well, in this in the spirit of transparency, I'm apolitical mostly, right? So when it comes to the matters of the Supreme Court and because I'm familiar with the shenanigans, well, what I perceive, let me rephrase that, what I perceive as shenanigans, and I don't really, using if we use Dr. Claude Anderson's suggestions, if we follow his guidance, I don't really believe the Supreme Court can have more of a bearing on us justice wise than it has had before. I don't. In other words, I don't see the influence of the Supreme Court increasing if we do the things that Dr. Claude Anderson, and if you don't mind, I might add, if we did the things that Dr. Claude Anderson and Dr. Amos Wilson have advised us to do, and within doing those things, we would be stronger organizationally. We would be stronger economically, and we would also be able to have greater influence over those elected officials, including those that get appointed to lifetime positions. That hasn't happened. So because that hasn't happened, the Supreme Court nominations and the decisions that are made are just uh, more of the same. The oppression is going to continue to be an ebb and flow between terrorism and or white terrorism and white benign neglect.
Okay, so that's interesting. I like to explore that a little more. Your assertion that if we do the things that a healthy community should be doing, Roe versus Wade, either way, really won't have any increase or noticeable impact on us as a black racial demographic. Is that what I hear you to say?
Yeah, I would. Now, keep in mind, I'm also speaking, um, as we discussed in the previous podcast. I come at things from an African centered perspective, first and foremost, not only, but first and foremost. And yeah, I don't. I'm not saying that the impact and the effects aren't harmful. I'm just saying I don't believe that it would be worse if we were more organized, if we were more African centered in our consciousness, and um, if we leaned more into spiritual power. But most importantly, if we also activated the things that Dr. Claude Anderson and Dr. Amos Wilson have advised us to do.
So I think in our previous session, we pretty much came to the conclusion that as a black racial demographic, we are not a community. And I don't think we specifically said that, but would it be fair enough to make that conclusion? And before we move on, let me make sure that we're all on the same page. Would it be fair enough to say that as a collective group considered to be black, a black racial community, are we actually a community? Have we answered that question since the previous discussion?
Well,
Let's
I
start
think I
with.
was probably the one dissenting voice
Okay, Rod, go ahead.
that discussion. Just to be honest,
Uh,
I'm still the dissent. I think I'm still one of the dissenting voices in that discussion.
And
I,
so
I,
you believe that we are a community.
I believe it depends on whose definition we're cleaving to. Uh, and as I said in the previous discussion, although I love and appreciate Dr. Claude Anderson, I believe that his approach and
Right.
his definitions, although are pro-black, they're not African centered.
We're not African centered. That's right. Okay. Daniel?
I will spark. I will. I don't want to hedge, but I have to be careful of how I say it. So, the answer to the question in a word is no. We're not. What we actually are a are a we are a collection of competing factions. And not everybody is rowing the boat in the same direction. In fact, some people are rowing the boat backwards, and some people are are boring holes in the boat. So you have individuals such as Brother Karanji and Brother Rock, and yourself, who are trying to move the collective progressively forward, either through African centered mindset and orientation, or just a love for our people. Then you have people that are, I've got mine and screw everybody else. And then you've got the people that are actively working to set us, either maintain the status quo on behalf of a oppressive system, or even pull us backwards. So we have several competing factions. Um, I think it was Chris Rock who best said it. You've got black folk and you got niggas, and black folk are trying to move us forward and take us, build back the community and build back the unity. And you got niggas setting us back, and you've got people that are on either side of the equation, and some people that have decided, hell with y'all. I want to be as close to being white adjacent as possible. And so we have several different competing factions. One thing I've learned, though, about movements, and especially about watching dominant society, or mainstream society, if you will, it doesn't require everyone to be on board. You just require what's called a Malcolm Gladwell, the tipping point, right? You need enough to be able to tip the scales the way we are looking to go, and we need to remove some bodies from the negative side of the scale. Everybody doesn't have to be on board, and I think we fall into the fallacy that it has to be 100% participation or zero. we can make moves with just 15 to 20% participation, as long as we agree that we're trying to move forward.
Got you. And by the way, Daniel, I used that line you just stated because it was so powerful when you said it last time, and I was in some previous discussions, and your voice popped right in my head, because a lot of people really believe that change has to be in mass. And when you brought that statistic, that really gave me even a more a sense of empowerment and hope, because you don't need a big team.
No,
you just need
you just need a unified team.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes we get so caught up in trying to recruit a big team that we don't focus on building a unified, strong team. Because people are followers. Let's be honest. Most people are followers. If you give them something strong enough to follow, then they fall in line. But you have to not just give them, once you know, at the beginning, before we started, you spoke about how powerful an ideal and hope is. Right. And so sometimes, and you can't just give them ideals and hope. You also have to start showing them results. And sometimes we forget about the results part of things. So, but that's just me stepping back, looking at things from a big picture lens, and then juxtaposing that against what do other people do and what do other communities do.
Yeah. Well, it was really powerful when you said it, and it resonated with me. What were you going to say, Rob?
I just want to ask, if since it sounds like we agree, and again, this is not throwing shade on Dr. Claude Anderson, because he may disagree with this, but it sounds like we're agreeing that his definition, although robust and logical, is coming from a Black perspective, but a European consciousness, right? So having said that, maybe one of the ways for us to move the needle to the left or to the right is to throw in, well, what are some of the other prevailing definitions of a community? So if I were to lean into a European construct and use like one of the prevailing definition of community, it says a group of people living in the same place and having a particular characteristic in common. So the question is, how does it advance our interests as Black people and or African-centered people to move further away from this definition? Is that advancing our interests, or is it hindering us from moving forward?
Okay, good stuff. So before we get into that, let's get Karanji in. I want him to see where Karanji is on his assessment of the Black racial community. Karanji, are we a community?
Yeah, I would say we're a community. I think we don't really appreciate all of the things that do bring us together. Are we a healthy community? No, we're not healthy, right, but we are a community. Because a community, like you said, in definition, if I'm not mistaken, live in a similar area with what's the second part of the definition you said, Rock? I don't want to misquote you.
No doubt. It's a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common.
Okay, so that's a lot. So, okay, I live in Detroit. I live on the west side of the city, and I live in a majority Black African neighborhood, and we live in the same area, and we have similar likes and dislikes. And I would say we're a community. Now, are we existing in a healthy African-centered mentality? No, but we will. I know for a fact that there are certain things that I know for a fact that people in this community, quote unquote, will accept and will not accept, from anybody coming into our community, or even those who do exist in the community. I put a post up recently on Facebook, I talked about how in the Black community, one thing that's a communal behavior for the most part is respect. Like respect is a big thing with Black people. Like on a even higher level, I think than even white people. Like you just can't say certain things to Black people, even within our culture, on certain levels. Like you can't say stuff about. Uh, you just can't call a man a bitch. Um, it's just certain things that in our culture you can't talk back to people's mothers. Like it is other. It's you really, and that's just really getting to the beginning of it. We have a big thing on respect in our culture. Now is it regional or is it absolute? But you can pretty much expect that in the black, like for example, it's known in the Black community that you don't talk back and disrespect your parents. Okay, we don't recognize that's a cultural norm in our culture, in our community, but it's there. Whereas if you look at, we can see our community. If we watch another show, we watch a white Caucasian TV show or in public. Kill almost talking like that to my mom. You know what I'm saying? We already know there's a certain level of respect. So to me, that's an example of culture. Also, how we deal with when it comes to respect to those who have passed away. We have a certain we do that differently than other cultures do. We don't even realize. I haven't one day we need to sit back and nobody has really sit back and maybe few have sat back and taken a real what's the word for it? A real inventory of the things that we have that we still have that are African that we do every day that we don't recognize, but it's just it's built into us that they cannot beat out of us, and that is what makes us a community. Of course, our similar experiences do as well, but I think we are a community, but a very traumatized, damaged.
Okay, so I'm here. I'm hearing the very perspectives here, and it reminds me of a quote that Dr. Anderson made about the state of our community. Again, I'm going to paraphrase it. You know, Dr. Claude Anderson is raw. He's real, and he's funny too. He doesn't even try to be funny. He's just funny. He says Black people don't have a community. All they got is just a place to sleep.
Who?
Well, yeah, but see the
Yeah,
thing,
what? You have a what?
a place
He
to
said
sleep.
Black people don't have a community. All they got is just a place to sleep. And he based that off of his definition of community, which is a community is one that can get all of their needs, the majority of their needs, met with inside itself, from education, safety, food, employment, any of the quality of life components that we need to live, that we get that met within our community, where going outside of our community is an option. Somebody's got some background noise on in the back. If they can turn that down, wherever that is, I'm hearing that. I'm not sure where it's coming from. But so that's what he said. For us, our experience is we come back to the place where we're all in one spot that we call our neighborhoods. We go to sleep, and then we get up. If we got jobs, we immediately leave our community to live, and we're gone making a living. Then we come back. All you got time to do is eat and go to sleep. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So now, Rock said something very powerful. He put it in a question. He said, "My misgiving about Dr. Anderson is that he's Eurocentric based. He's coming from a Black perspective." And we talked about this in the previous session, agreeing that Black is really a European label, correct? So if you're coming from a Black perspective, aren't you ultimately coming from a Eurocentric perspective? I'm gonna open it up and you guys tell me what you think about that.
Well, I might I would be remiss if I didn't add to the fact that, and please understand that I love Dr. Claude Anderson, and I'm not speaking negatively about him, but we don't we do ourselves a disservice when we don't identify consciousness or micropolitics. Let's use that, right? His micropolitics appear to be connected to Black respectability politics. It's like a finger wagging situation. Like, you Black people better, like that's the energy that I get from him. Right? He may disagree, and people who love him may disagree. But what I'm saying is, he has not stated explicitly that he's African centered. Right? I've never heard him state that, and I've listened to a lot. I have his books, and I've listened to his lectures. He's very close to, at times, the Bill Cosby pound cake speech. He's right there. He gets very close to really chastising Black people. And when you chastise Black people more than when you chastise the effects more than you chastise the cause, that to me is Black respectability politics. Right? So what I'm saying is, his definition is sound, but I agree with Karanji. Yeah, we have a community. If we use the baseline definition for community, we do have a community. We may not have a functional community or a healthy community, or we may not be operating as a community in the way Dr. Claude Anderson sees community. But by saying that we don't have a community, does that hurt us or does that help us? Right? I don't feel empowered when I hear him say we don't have a community. I feel disempowered when I hear him say that, because I feel like a part of a community. I feel like a part of this community. I feel like a part of this community. When I'm involved with organizational work, I feel like I'm a part of a community. So I don't know if the things that he's saying are necessarily, yes, they are. They're radical and they're arousing, but are they advancing our interests?
I like to comment on that. So I pointed out, and thanks for you. That's phenomenal comments too, right? So I look at it from an international standpoint. I think that's a good way to look at it. Do people from other countries look at African Americans, Africans in America as a community? And I think the answer is yes. If you look at people, I've talked to sisters from Eritrea, Somalia, Kenya, other people from all across the country, many African people, not all, because I've talked to everybody, but a lot of them look up to us as the models of African people. Did you know that? We don't realize our power. Really, we don't. I went to London, England several years ago just to visit a sister who was there. And, we went out to a club and, we're relaxing and we listened to some music. They played the local British music and they played the Caribbean music, because a lot of Caribbeans there, a little African music. You know when the crowd went crazy? When they play African American music. You know how powerful that is? Like, not to say, well, that's just music, but music is power. It's very powerful. A Baba of mine, like an elder of mine, went to Ghana. In the middle of Ghana, not in Accra, not in Accra, but like a city like Detroit, and like not outside the main city of the capital of Ghana. She said the first thing the brothers asked about it was Tupac. So even though Tupac is not in specific to any particular tribe in America, one thing I learned from African people is that one thing they liked about African American people is when you come to America, You are part of us. It doesn't matter if you're from Somalia. It doesn't matter if you're from Jamaica. It don't matter if you're from Jamaica. If you don't matter from anywhere. If you're black, you're part of us. A good example was about a month ago. The brother got killed in Grand Rapids, right? The brother from Uganda. Who came out and support that brother? The black community. The black community drew support for that brother to protect that brother and surround his family and to help to bring justice for that cop that assassinated that brother in the streets like a dog. That is an example.
Let me make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Let me make sure I'm hearing you correctly on why you see the criteria you're using to describe us as a community.
Like so
you're saying I'm just summarizing real quick to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. You're saying we're a community because Africans see us as a community. You're saying we're a community because under times of adversity or stress, we come around as an emotional support.
Emotional and a functional support many times, not just emotional.
And what support?
And a functional support.
Functional support.
Yeah, we actually, the brother, whether it's lawyers, whether it's protesting, whether it's tearing this motherfucker up, you know what I'm saying? We might say, well, that's not good protest. But when you start taking money out of white people's hands, it may not sit. I'm not a big protest person, like, oh, that's the solution. Whatever we got to do, we do to protect our people. Not everything. I think we should go further, actually. That's another conversation. But those type of things are examples of how we galvanize. If we were truly a divided people, like in some countries, if you're not in this particular culture, like if you are Somalian and he's Jamaican, if something happened to you, they don't care about you. Well, that's a Somalian dude. That wasn't me. We say, no, we don't care if you're from Uganda or if you're from the east side of Detroit or if you're from Southeast DC. You still, if it happened to you, it happened to us. So
okay, so let me challenge you. Let me challenge you on that.
Let me finish that. My last phrase. So resources are not just financial or tangible that you can hold in your hand. A resource that the community provides is also the emotional, spiritual, and social protection. That's also a resource as well that we can count as something that's very real. Go ahead, though.
If we're a community and in the perception that you say we have outside of the country, what contributes then to our lower ranking across all systemic areas quality of life? If we're a community, if we got each other's back, if we're perceived as this, inspirational concept of Black America, why in reality are we consistently low in every positive measure, first place in every negative measure, and we do not seem to be collectively working together with that?
Because to be very honest, we are still under extreme trauma and extreme attack. People forget that slavery was only over 165 years ago. Then even after slavery, see, a lot of people say, oh, slavery was over. It was all good. We were straight. No. We know, all the Black people on this particular panel should know that the extreme terrorism, lasted at least another 100 years, if not longer than that. Extreme terrorism, extreme disenfranchisement, extreme genocidal actions. You can go, so we're just barely getting over looking at the fact that there isn't even a hill that exists.
Well, yeah, that's true. I agree.
The fact that we've made it this far is a fucking miracle. That's why, to my language, I cuss sometimes. That's why white people, Caucasian people in particular, are so intimidated. We beat the brakes off of these people, and they still are surviving and moving forward and still not giving up. It's like you beat somebody down really bad that you know is better than you and stronger than you. They don't know they're better than you and stronger than you because Black people don't know how powerful we are. That's the biggest weakness we have. We don't know two things. We don't know how powerful we are. We don't know how important it is for us to work together. Our love to have for each other. And I say love, I mean love, functional love, not like I'm talking about, we realize that they know that. So it's like a person that's smaller than you, and they know that you're bigger than them, you're stronger than them, you're smarter than them, but you don't know it yet. And so, going back to where we are and why we are at the bottom, and that's true, we are at the bottom. That's the reality of it. But they know this, and they know. I met a sister, I call her from Guam. They have African people there. She said her mom is Guamanese. I don't know if they call Guamanese, which is like in Polynesia. She was like, black people don't realize this is a woman outside of our culture. If black people, African people in America ever woke up, they'll rule the whole world. He said they are so naturally dominant. She's from a total different culture that they naturally dominate without even have to. Imagine the people that are so dominant that they dominate without even using violence. We don't dominate by hurting people. That's a very intimidating thing. A sister I talked to the other day said the reason why white people are racist is because it really comes from a psychological insecurity. Racism is a functionality of insecurity. They already know that we are powerful people. So they have to be very insistent in keeping us below. And so the biggest thing that black people forgot is that there is a very intentional system and action for your destruction and for your marginalization. So that's how you answer that question.
So it's
intentional.
Let's bring it around. I know Daniel's been chomping at the bit. I can see he's got some subject. Come on,
yeah.
Daniel.
So I think this is the perfect time to bring in the statement that I made earlier, which is, and you have to look at the historical context. The root of most oppression is economics, all the way from slavery to Jim Crow to current day. Now, that does have a militarized function to it, keep these people in their place. But from slavery being an economic system and the underpinning of the wealth from most of the capitalists in this country, intergenerational wealth, through to Jim Crow, where you kept African descendants from being able to acquire the principles of wealth, even to the point where a significant portion of the individuals who were lynched under Jim Crow were actually business owners and wealthy African American people. We haven't even gotten to talking about towns such as Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, all the places around the nation that were thriving, African-centered and African-run, prosperous towns that were ultimately destroyed and undermined, right? The news recently has been talking about the people in California, the family that just got back the beach that's worth something like $50 million. They purchased it for something like $2,100 almost 100 years ago. And they were hated so much that after they overcame all of the individual issues against them, the city just took the land from them, right? So when we talk about oppression, when we talk about the effects, we can't talk about the effects without talking about the cause of those effects. And when we talk about the issues that we have, and by the way, I'm listening to Karanji, and what I'm hearing from what he's describing really sounds a lot more like culture than community to me. And the reason I say that is I'm from Jamaica, right? So I grew up here, but I was born in Jamaica. And when I first came to the States, I had the accent. And so when you have an accent, you don't fit in always, right? Like you don't fit in the group until you've figured out a place within that structure. Even here in South Florida, and I think the dynamics are very different here in South Florida, where you have people from all over. There was a significant point of time where people of Jamaican descent and people of Haitian descent had violent conflict with each other, right? Same communities, same neighborhoods, very similar backgrounds as far as Haiti being the only enslaved nation to be able to take its freedom militarily. Jamaica, just known for being some unruly slaves or unruly enslaved people. Very similar people, but taught how to hate each other. And it just reminds me of Malcolm X, right? Who taught you how to hate yourself? And I think that's really what it comes back to for me is when we talk about all of these things, it really comes back to what Karanji said, so I disagree with part of it, but I agree with the other part, which is how important it is to love. And I think a huge part of the issue and why I feel we have challenges as a community, we haven't learned how to love ourselves on an individual level, and we haven't learned how to love each other on a collective level. How can I be violent against you if I love myself and I see myself in you, right?
So let me interject right there. That's a powerful statement what you said, and I think it ties right in to Rock's earlier observation and question with the origin of the cultural origin of Dr. Claude Anderson's formula. And we agreed that he's coming from a black perspective, and we agreed that black is a Eurocentric label. So how can we love ourselves and love each other with a Euro construct identity of hate?
I don't think that black is a Eurocentric construct, personally. It can be maybe have been shifted their way, but I mean, if you go back even to antiquity or before then, our people were, there was our black skin was something that we always, like Kemet is
okay, hold on. Let's keep this relevant because people throw in, well, race started way back then and there. We're going to be real specific. We're talking about the Europeans' documented creation of race ideology, not what happened in Kemet and the Moors and all that. That's a separate issue. We're talking about the historical 1600s creation of race ideology that justified the transatlantic slave trade that America operated on still to this day.
So there was
and from there, before that origination, we operated by cultural terms, like Daniel said.
No, I mean that existed, but even in this country before, like they may have used race to divide us, but we were even before race became the thing to divide us, blacks were still known as blacks, like the land of the blacks. That was Ethiopia.
Hey, you keep going back. You keep going back.
No,
we're not talking. We're talking about we want to stay because that rationale conflates two different things, and they're not the same thing. That's fine. Race was used more as a grouping, a kinship. Yeah. We're talking about the Eurocentric use of race. That's what we want to talk about because we're not using that other aspect that you're talking about. We're talking about the Eurocentric specific use of race. And when we talk about black, we're not talking about Kemet black. We're talking about Eurocentric black. So so again, the question is, if we're operating under a label, which is a racial classification of identity, that isn't who we actually are, how can we love ourselves and each other?
I'm not sure if you could totally separate them 100%. I get your point, though. I think, first of all, the one thing is that it's important for African people to define themselves.
Critical.
So I'm African, but I can be black and African too. I can appreciate, like he may have used race, that blackness to oppress my people and to divide us, but that does not mean that I am not African or that I'm also not black and that my blackness is not beautiful. So I'm trying to understand your use of it. Now, the Eurocentric use of it to oppress us, to divide us, yes, that was used, but he was basically putting something positive to a negative.
Yeah, but what you're saying is idealistic. When the reality of the fact is, as a black community, again, as we said earlier, we're last in everything positive, first in everything negative. So if it really was about black is beautiful and black power, and we really believe that, we would not be in our current situation.
I think we would be, because we have a lot to overcome. I think it's important to note what Daniel and myself said also was the intentional oppression and destruction of a people. So let's go deeper into it. So we talk about the things that Daniel mentioned, the destruction of Tulsa, Oklahoma, the lynchings. We go on and on and on. Keep in mind, we're learning these things in 2022. A lot of it. This shit is not in no textbooks for our babies to learn. This is not like, we don't imagine how much more we would love ourselves if we knew ourselves. So that is the functionality of it as well. We don't know our greatness. Half the babies don't know that when they go through a stoplight, there's a black man that made that stoplight. You don't know that. Because we're not, so the system is deeper than just the physical destruction of us. It's also the mental, systemic destruction of our babies every generation. That's why I said earlier, if we began to, first of all, just focus on loving the babies. If I say, for example, if Rock has a son, I love his son, like even I don't have any children yet, like he's my son, and then Daniel, I love Daniel's son, and we all love their children, they're going to produce a generation of love at each other. Just off rip. May not be perfect, but it's going to be love. Like I learned love from George, Daniel, Rock, and Karanji. They all my babas. My biological daddy was Rock, but I have four daddies. That's the foundation of it. Is how can we multiply love into our children? Once we do that and work and unify, it's over. I talked to a sister. I talked to a sister in Africa. I always have to go to Africa because I like to get there. They have some foundational pieces I think we're missing. And they said, she's told me, a sister, beautiful sister, she said, in Africa, you are not allowed to say my child. It is dishonorable to say my child. And today in 2022 in Kenya, that's how much the village is respected in Africa. So if this was our children, even though it came from imagine that power. That's what we're missing. And so many, I don't know who's on that post, so many people pushed against me on that. I'm that baby, that daddy. You can't tell it. Like everybody was so much against that whole idea of everybody being dedicated to loving the babies unapologetically. It was that's the part that I think we're missing the most. That's the love part, you know.
So I want to hop in real quick because I don't want to lose this point. To the question that George actually asked, there are two aspects that we're kind of dealing with. There's the internal issues and the external issues. I actually think that we go one step further. Before we can love the babies, we got to learn how to love ourselves. That's the internal, right? If we can internalize that, each of us internalize that. You can't give love if you don't have love. Makes sense, right? So it has to start with an internal reframing and an intentional internal reframing of who we are and what we love about ourselves. I do want to talk about the issue, and Karanji brought it up before, but this is so critical, is what we're seeing right now happen going all the way back to the beginning, 1619, 1774, 1776, 1865, 1965, present day. This is really a fight at the root of it for two things: economics and definition. The right to, who has the right to define who we are. And for a long time, one group has said, you are this, these people are this, these people are this, and that became the default categorization. And what we're really discussing right now is, how do we take back the power to define who we are as an individual and as a community? And you're seeing a lot of pushback for that, right? Because, you know, it goes back to like the word nigga. Like, people are saying, and wherever you fall on that, it's about who defines what this word really means in context. Not the word in the dictionary, but the word in context. And so this fight for definition is central to the fight for economics and resources. If I can define you as less than, and you internalize that definition, then I have succeeded in making you take yourself off of the playing field, off of the battlefield, right? If you hate yourself, you internalize that hate and you direct that hate against your brother, then you and your brother are so busy fighting each other over scraps and neighborhoods you don't even own that you allow me to come in and swoop in and pick up the spoils while you're beefing and while you're in conflict with your brother, right? So that is why self-love, self-definition, to me, starts with the root. And it could be anything from Black to African centered. But whatever it is, it has to be rooted in a love of self. You can start with Black and be working towards being more African centered. As long as you have love for yourself and for your people, I think that is where you can build some level of progress on. You'll never be perfect, right? And Brother Rock spoke so eloquently about it in the last episode, how there are times where he's still working on being African centered because we're internalized to this society. And that goes back to the central question, which is where does Brother Dr. Claude Anderson fall? I believe he would love to have been more African centered, but understanding that you operate within the societal system of a white supremacy society that is designed and predicated on racial classifications based on skin color. And the question he was trying to answer is, how do we move from where we currently are within the context of the system we operate in to where we need to be as a people, but understanding the context of you're not moving in a vacuum, you're moving against resistance. And I think that is why the way that he speaks sounds the way it is, because let's be honest, he's trying to wake up some people, right? There may be 10, 15% of us that understand the context of the system that we're in, but that's almost 80, 85% of us that are still not aware of the active impact of the system that we're fighting against. And I think that that's probably the context of how he operated.
Okay, well said. I appreciate that very nuanced explanation. I want to get rocking on this on this question. I want to make sure we've really milked this question. Rock, can you really love yourself if you're Black?
Not that I'm trying to intentionally be provocative or not answer your question directly, but again, one of the things that I go back to is we can't solve our problems that were created with a European consciousness with solutions that come from the same consciousness, right? Although I understand and appreciate Black love, and we hear that a lot. To me, it's even become overused. I didn't talk about it a lot previously because just over the past 2 years have I started to study African philosophy. And over the last 2 years have I started to really dig deeper into the different cosmologies all throughout the continent of Africa. And what I'm finding is that there isn't a lot of discussion about love as I'm reading these, especially discussions about love from the Eurocentric hearts, red hearts, and I just love myself. I've not found that to be a prevailing concept. What I have found, however, is the prevailing concept through the different African philosophers and the different cosmologies is principles and virtues and discipline and gratitude and things like that. Things that that are connected to a active form of appreciation and an emotional form of appreciation. And so my point is, when we start to have discussions about Black love, to me, it mostly is connected to an emotion, not action. Love in action, or principles in action, or virtues in action, or dignity in action, or gratitude in action. See, on the continent, the philosophers and the jegnas and the elders in the community, they're talking about a feeling and an action. You're not a person in some in some countries and in some cosmologies unless you present yourself with a certain level of principles. You're not even considered a person. Personhood requires that you act out your principles, that you live, that it's a part of your life. It's what you do. It's not just what you feel. So my point is, in answering your questions, no, we're not going to solve our problems using Eurocentric concepts of love until we adopt African-centered concepts of action. You have to be principled, and those principles have to be a part of your life. And when they're a part of your life, when you're doing it, then you will automatically have gratitude and appreciation and efficacy and high self-esteem and all of those things that combine together equal love and action. Until we start doing those things, then no, just the simple concept of loving thyself is definitely not enough, because we've heard that narrative before. That's an old narrative. It's been around for 30, 40, 50 years, right? Has that solved our problem? Have we advanced our interests by just using tossing around self-love and black love? No, we have not advanced our interests yet. So we have to get back to using some African-centered consciousness, and we have to get back to action, not just words, action, and those actions require principles, virtues, gratitude, compassion, dignity, a whole. It's robust, but we have to do those things. We can't just talk about feeling good.
You know, I just asked a simple question. I
apologize, brother. I apologize.
I just asked a simple question. And boy, let me tell you, if I had 10 mics, I'd drop them all right now. Man, you laid that out. Is that in the book? Have you written your book yet, bro? Because that needs to be in a book.
Appreciate that.
That was heavy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with what I said, definitely. When I was mentioning the love of the babies, I wasn't talking about just giving them hugs and kisses. I mean, showing it to them, like through action, feeding them, spend time with them. You know what I'm saying? So when I say love, like I said, all I said is not. I said not a rubby-dubby, lovey-dovey. You know what I'm saying? That's cool to have hugs, but like not just like you said, like the emotional love, just only quote unquote. But what are you doing with those babies? You know, I look at the elders that was around me when I was growing up that did stuff with me. Those are the ones that I remember as being the ones who showed me love, showed me, like you said, showed you love. But like you said, go back to Daniel's point, you know, you have to show love for yourself first, though. Show it through action. What are you doing? Are you taking care of your body? Are you reading? Are you learning? Are you helping your community out? Are you studying? You know, are you cultivating a higher thought process? Are you cultivating your spirituality? You know, are you healing the traumas you've had from your family from the past? Those things are self-love things that you have to have a level of that before you can love the babies. I do agree. A level of stability financially, some type of way to figure out to provide for yourself and those around you. So yeah, that's all action, like you said. You know, right? You know.
But that's where we're failing, and we're failing fabulously in those areas. We're failing so much, in my humble opinion. It's not even. It's rarely a part of the conversation. Empathy and compassion and principles and values and dignity and gratitude. Those are the things that we need to be talking about. See, I love myself because I have those things. See, I live by my principles. You can see in my walk, right? You can see them in the things that I do, my conviction, my confidence, my rah-rah, whatever you want to call it. That's my love. That's how, so I don't have to talk about whether I love myself. You can see that I love myself, but you can see that I love myself because I do the other things. Like, I don't just talk about healing, and I go to therapy. You know what I mean? I do the work. The work is love, right? But the work is, it incorporates a number of things, and not only does it incorporate the things that you're strong in, it incorporates getting better at the things that you're weak in. See, because I know my shortcomings too, so I'm okay with if somebody says, "Well, Rock, blah blah blah." You know, if it comes from somebody that I trust and that
I tell you, like, Mark, did you work out today? Mark, how you eating today? You feel like I'm working on
that's
that.
what I'm saying. If it comes from someone that I trust and respect, I can be honest and I can go, you know what? I did not do that. However, I will dedicate myself to getting better at that thing. And when I get better at that thing, before I get better at it, I got to acknowledge it. I got to be honest with myself. See, we can't talk about self-love if you're a liar to yourself, right? And a lot of us lie to ourselves. We're liars. So you can say love out of this side of your mouth, but out of the other side of your mouth, you're a liar, bro. Like, so no, there's no self-love. It's just words, right? So if we're going to talk about love, in my humble opinion, first, we need to use an African-centered word for love. We need to replace the word.
So hold on a minute. I know you got a mouthful there, Karanji.
Yes, sir.
We're coming toward the end. We're coming toward the end, and I really want to, in our last few minutes, expound on that, because that's what this forum is about. It's about action, and I just love that you brought it home there with action, and then in order to repair something, if something's not working properly, and we've all agreed that at the bare minimum we are a dysfunctional community. So, and I love what you said, Rock. You just really put a lot of good stuff in here in that last diatribe.
Thank you.
We got to stop lying to ourselves. We got to stop with the bullshit. I heard the brother say earlier today, I was on another podcast, and he said, you may have heard this before, but it was brand new to me. He said, bull and shit are first cousins.
Facts.
And we got to kick those. We got to kick them cousins out the family reunion, man. They can't come back. We got to stop lying to ourselves. If we're going to fix it, we got to be honest and look at our problems and really be honest about it. We can't say we love each other, but then we have a high murder rate against each other. We don't spend money with each other. Just think about it. Just think about it over the last week. How much of your money has been spent where it counts with people that look like you? Think about that. And we say we love each other.
Right.
We got to stop with the bullshit.
Right. Right.
And so I just think that, we need to make that a goal of forums like this is how do we actionize this? How do we put this into implementation? So, matter of fact, that's what I want to do. Let's take the next several minutes per individual and just brainstorm 2 or 3 ways of putting to action love in our community. That's got to be principled action. And we'll start with Brother Karanji.
Okay, I was thinking about something. But I think before you take action, you have to first diagnose what needs to be needs to be acted on. So I think as a people, we need to begin to diagnose ourselves and be very honest about the things that we have to heal. Um, and it's going to come from a place of a lot of insecurities. It's not going to be a health. It's not going to feel good and warm and fuzzy. It'll come from places that are not don't feel good. And I think that's the hardest thing for our people, particularly our men and our women. We respond to it differently. Women more emotionally, men more hard and more in denial. But we both have our different different weaknesses when it comes to addressing that. I like to go back to the four agreements, which are an ancient set of principles that I think they predate the Bible, and I think they help a lot. Dr. Rock was talking about, not bull, being very not bullshitting, basically, like you said, keeping your word, not lying to yourself. Now it has to do with impeccability, and we learn about that's the second agreement. Be impeccable with your word, and it's hard for a lot of us. We all break our word from time to time. And the biggest person we break our word to is not to others; it's really to ourselves. We say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week, or I'm going to go to this meeting, or I'm going to do this." And we every single day, every one of us breaks a promise to ourselves. I promise you. We made some type of way. We do something we're not supposed to do that we said we wasn't going to do, or we don't do something that we said we were going to do that we wanted to do. So that's the first step, I think, as a people to diagnose how we can begin to see the things that we need to work on. Because I think a lot of times, a lot of things that have become acceptable should not be acceptable. Like it's going to take a whole rethinking of how we think about an African. We have to really change your thought process of what, like for example, he said, what Rock said, what love is. It's so romanticized. The romanticized. Oh, baby, I love you. Oh my God, you know what I'm saying? That's not love. That's a bunch of bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Even if, and it goes to our relationships. Why do you think we have so many dysfunctional relationships? Because relationships are over emotionalized. It's too much, and it's not actionable. And it just fucks. So you have all this. Even people who are quote unquote married, they have all this toxic monogamy. My boy, we went out to see PJ Morton last night. He got to sneak out the house because his wife, he was going and fuck with some, you know what I'm saying? Because of that, dis-ease. So we have to have a lot of work. How do we first begin to diagnose our sicknesses? People say, well, let's go ahead and act on things. Let's heal the community. No, you can. If you go to a doctor, the first thing they do is diagnose you. You cannot begin to heal until you diagnose what the fuck is wrong with you. Write those things down on a sheet of paper or on a computer, wherever the fuck you want to put it, and say, I'm work on A, B, and C, and D, E, and F, these particular ways. And then after you find out what your issues are, then you can say, what are some African-centered ways I can heal these particular things? That's another thing, too. We try, like Rock said, we try to use Eurocentric solutions for African problems sometimes. We can't, that doesn't work for us. We have to begin to think with an African or whatever, black African, that's even black is better than white. You know what I'm saying? A Eurocentric. Begin to think with a mentality that is going to be from our people, for our people. Begin to study some ways that it works for us. And that is how you begin. First, I would say, once again, diagnose. Secondly, begin to research solutions. And also, I would say, come collectively do these things. Don't do it on an island by yourself. I got some similar problems Rock do. I got some similar issues that George got. I got some similar issues that Daniel has. Strengths as well. I got some strengths that George doesn't have that he may need from me. I got some strengths that Rock has that he may need from me. Rock got some strengths that I don't have that he can give to me. And that's how you build that mathematics and that science and that power. Because you get a constant circle. Hey, Rock, I really need you to help me with this. Hey, Dad, I need you to help me with this. And then Rock say, hey, brother, I need you to help me with this. And that's how that's how you build the healing. That's how you build the real love. Because that's action. And that's how I think that's how you begin it. And it has to be intentional and unapologetic, and patient. We'll be very patient with each other because we're all traumatized, and me and Rock, we love each other so much, but we bumped heads a lot. But we all come back and got love for each other. Last thing I would say on that particular note, we cannot be so easy to dispose of each other. Like we dispose of each other so easily. If I got a disagreement with you, Chris, and you, George, and now you say, fuck Karan, I ain't talking to that nigga no more, and never speak to me again. We cannot, we can't afford to dispose of each other when we have these brothers like this. Like I said, me and Rock have gotten into heated arguments, but we never go dispose of each other.
Well said, Karanji. I love that, man. I wrote all that down. Those are good, excellent suggestions. Rock. You said enough, bro. If you don't want to say no more, that's fine, because you really dropped it.
I appreciate
because really all you be doing is being redundant right now, because you really laid it out.
No, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. I think I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier, and I think I just found two things to add to that, and lean into your spirituality and your principles out loud. Don't be the Most High secret agent. Lean into your spirituality and be okay with talking about it. Be okay with forcing yourself to live your spirituality. Number one. Number two, give the stiff arm to individualism. Y'all seen the Heisman Trophy, right? Give the stiff arm to rugged individualism, and give the stiff arm to perfectionism. This is not about perfection. We hinder ourselves when we look for singular solutions and perfect solutions. Get rid of all of that. Focus on execution. Just do it. Do your spirituality. Do your principles. Do mobilization. Do organizational work. Do it. Talk about it, but do it. I think those are some of the building blocks that help us.
Thank you, brother. Daniel.
All right. So I'm listening to these amazing brothers, and I don't know if I can come up with a macro solution. So what I'm going to do is give three things that worked for me. Think three things that helped me to progress to being a bit more intentional about being a agent for my community, for the uplifting of my community. The first thing I had to do is three simple words. I had to suppress my ego. I had to learn when I was reacting in ego as opposed to when I was reacting on principle. And a lot of the times we get the two confused, right? And there's so many brothers right now, either under a tombstone or behind bars, that allowed their ego to take over for a split fraction of a second and made a decision based on that. So for me, I had to learn first to stop operating in ego and to start operating under principle, to Rock's point. So that was the first thing that helped me with my progression. The second thing was to then develop respect for myself. What are the principles that are important to me? What are my non-negotiables? Where is there a little bit of room to bend? But what are the principles, and ensure that these principles are consistently applied to anything that I encounter. And then the third was respect for my community. So first I had to master self, then I had to set specific principles, and then I had to set a mastery of my environment and my place within my environment by respecting my community. Several years ago, I made a decision that outside of basketball, I am not going to speak to my brother. I'm not beefing with black men anymore. We might disagree. We might not see eye to eye, but because I respect myself, I respect you. I see the divinity in you. I see the promise in you. I see the intelligence in you, because I see that in myself. And so outside of basketball, because I have to give myself a little bit of space to work within that, I made a conscious definitive declaration that I'm no longer beefing with black men. And it has shifted the way that I move through the world. Now, of course, we're not perfect. Brother Rock just perfectly said it. Perfection is the enemy of progression. But those three things, mastering my ego or suppressing my ego, respecting myself, and then respecting my community, I think set the base for being able to move forward as a community and as a culture.
Well done. Well done. Well done. You know, I love this form. I love you guys because it's just very challenging. I know for a lot of people it's very cerebral, but you know what? We're just trying to get that 15%. We're just trying to get that 15%. And for those of you that are saying, can you break it down to fifth grade level? The answer is no, we can't. Because we have our problems are much more complex than a fifth grader. And if all you think about your community is enough to give it a fifth grade level attempt, then you're not serious about your community. So my last parting advice would be, or suggestions, in alignment with Dr. Anderson's 5-floor model, join your local Black Chamber of Commerce. Whether you are a business owner or not, that Chamber of Commerce is your most vital weapon. And it is only as strong as the community that supports it. The Hispanic community has a very powerful Chamber of Commerce. And every other cultural group has a much more powerful Chamber of Commerce. It's very intentional and very intentful. So we need, morality, right and wrong, all that stuff is good. Principles, all is good. But it's only as good as the paper you got to back it. Because if you ain't got paper, most people's principles is gonna fly out the window. Most, not all. But when it comes down to survival, you got to do what you got to do. And Black America is in a constant, as Brother Karanji said, is in a constant state of survival. So in order for us to get from the reactive side to the proactive side, that takes cash. It takes an economic base. That, along with all these other great suggestions, I think would be a very powerful recipe for success. So on that, gentlemen, you've been great. There's gonna be a continuation of series. We're going to come back to this from time to time. We're going to grow this theme, put some action to it. We're going to, as in the words of Rock Soldier, do it. And I want to leave everybody with that as we sign off. Do it.
Get that work in, y'all.
I feel like we're about to get a cease and desist letter from Nike.
Daniel, thank you. Karanji, thank you.
Thank you.
Rock, as always, thanks for bringing on the bacon, brother.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate y'all.
Peace and
This
love.
has been great. For you that have been out there watching and listening, thank you for indulging us. And this has been a great episode of Black Space Live. And until then, we will see you on the other side.
Yes, sir. Thanks, y'all.